Buongiorno a tutti e tutte, benvenuti in un nuovo appuntamento nelle interviste di Lago Film Fest. Sempre io, Nicolas Nawel Turchi, ma non preoccupatevi, da un momento all'altro potrebbe cambiare l'interlocutore di queste interviste. Sono qui oggi per fare un'intervista a un altro film del concorso Nuovi Segni, il concorso dedicato alle opere sperimentali o quantomeno presunte tali, o quantomeno film che hanno dei nuovi linguaggi e dei nuovi modi di fare cinema, secondo noi. Sono onorato di poter parlare con il regista di un film che ci ha colpito molto a noi a Lago, questo film. Un film che riflette sul cinema e che riflette sul modo di vedere, che è un tema che a noi è sempre stato molto caro qui al Lago Film Fest, che in qualche modo insegna e trasmette un modo culturale di vedere il cinema e per quanto a lungo questo è durato. I will switch to English now. So it's my privilege to introduce to you all the director of La Mujer como Imagen, El Hombre como Portador de la Mirada, Carlos Velandia. Hola, Carlos.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having
Hello.
me.
No, thanks to you, and congratulations for the movie. As I said in Italian, we loved it. It was very in line with our vision of the festival and our idea of watching cinema. So, uh, really, thank you very much. So, Carlos, as a first question, I would love to ask you a general introduction of how La Mujer como Imagen, El Hombre como Portador de la Mirada came to be. What was the inception of the idea of the movie, how you developed it, and what can you basically tell us about the origin of the movie?
Okay, well, I think the origin of the film comes from a time where I took some classes in contemporary aesthetics, and I got to read one of the foundational essays of feminist film theory that's called narrative cinema and visual pleasure. I think maybe I said it in the wrong order, but it's an essay by Laura Mulvey, and in that essay she explains how the representation of women work in film, and also kind of how the representation of men work in film, and how that is a vehicle, a capitalist vehicle for patriarchal culture to expand in everyday life. So that was like the first seed I had, because I thought, how could we make a cinematic experience from these words or this essay? And that's where the journey began. And actually I started to work with this material, this footage of Hollywood films. And it took me, I would say, a couple of years to understand how to make this, let's say, speech discourse into a discourse of images and sound.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I believe it took a lot of years to do this because the movie is a real feast for the eyes and for the ears, because it layers so much about this all these scenes from all these different movies. What I really liked about the movie, and I would love to ask, is more than a cinephile look on the movie, on the subject, is more like a researched look on the movie. As you said, you were inspired by a film essay, and I would love to ask you, how did your experience as programmer helped you in researching the movies and make the movie itself?
Okay, well, just as a little background, I program films in Colombia. I was the head of programming at a film festival that's already like 25 editions old in my city, Bogota, and I've also collaborated with some documentary and short film festivals there. And I think it helped me to be able to bear the amount of images that I had to dealt with. But I mean, I think at no festival I had to watch so many films like for making this movie. As a matter of fact, when I began the research project, I had this idea of working with, like, my spectrum at the beginning was films that star an actress that the industry made a sex symbol.
Mhm.
So at that time, when I made the research, I had a list of over 1,000 films. And afterwards, I started to like make the list shorter, 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 until I had like the around 40 movies that I used that were also the movies that I was able to get, and that material was more than enough to
Mhm.
make like this short experiment. Maybe if I had the goal to make a longer movie, maybe more films would have helped. But I think the film, one thing that the film has is that it's on the verge of being redundant.
Mhm.
So you have, and with shorts, it's something that you have to be super careful with, so you don't explain more than you have to.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Also the fact that you started from like a very high concept and tried to narrow it down to a list of movies. It's very, very interesting. And one aspect that also captures, as I said before, is a feast for the eyes and sound, and and how you chose to represent this thesis about how Hollywood perceived these actresses is very interesting. So I wanted to ask you on a more technical side, like when did you decide that the juxtaposition in that way of the movies and the construction of the face of all these actresses and all these movies, how did you narrow the structure and the style of editing? And was it something that you had from the beginning, or was it something that you developed while watching and theorizing the structure?
Well, that's, I think that was one of the most complex things, because I already, at some point I already had watched all of the films. I cut them shot by shot and then organized each shot in different categories. You can imagine, like, I had around 60 different folders. For example, folders that had categories of shot type. As example, for this image, I would say it's like general shot, in which the female figure is shot frontally. But for other shots, maybe we also had general shot, but the figure is like in three quarters perspective. So it grew, the folders grew as I watched more and more films. At the moment, until the moment, I had like 60 different categories that also included actions. For example, a woman walking, smoking, talking to a different person, maybe being driven in a car. And afterwards, I started to cut the scenes into these loop animations that are in the final version of the film. But I had those sequences separated. And there
Mhm.
was a time, I think it took me about a couple of weeks without editing, thinking about how I could assemble the movie itself. And that
Mhm.
was the point in which I realized I had to move away from the essay itself, and I had to rewrite those ideas with images.
Mhm.
And at that moment, it became a little bit odd to me to work in that way, because I don't like storyboarding a lot, but I had to. And I had to like think, not maybe of a story, but a narrative or several narrative lines that could somehow assemble those images. So we, in that way, I understood that maybe as a structure that pointed to an idea of like a day in the life of was good
Mhm.
for the film, but it can, I think it just makes the movie start, and we're afterwards just rolling with it because of the amount of images and sounds we're having. We are at certain point just driven by the corporal experience of being in front of the film.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. No, it's very interesting. Yeah, I imagine that the construction of it was amazing, and thank you for the answer. And one second to last question that I would love to ask, since we share in a way the same role as programmers. One thing that I would love to ask you, being both a director and a programmer, how do you think that being a programmer influences you as a director, and vice versa? How being a programmer, how being a director, how being a programmer influences you in the other way?
I think my main film school was actually film
Hmm.
programming. I went
Okay.
to this like huge film school in Colombia that has like a degree has some degree studies, and I spent like 7 years there, but I think I never learned so much about filmmaking as when making film programming.
Hmm.
And I think as a director, what I learned was mainly understanding the world that we live in and the questions that are important right now, because
Hmm.
it's something that you get to see a lot in film schools. Like there are maybe talented people and interesting stories, but they're like disconnected from the real world. And I think something that we are, or at least I'm interested in as a programmer, is having some films that somehow question or challenge the contemporary world. So I
Hmm.
think that was one of the main things that I learned and that I'm very aware of while working on my own projects, and vice versa. I think that learning to appreciate the hard work that filmmaking is, because sometimes as a film programmer, I remember when I was a junior programmer in one festival in Colombia that I worked for several years. And I think somehow I was kind of stubborn, and I didn't appreciate even films that I knew we were not gonna select. I didn't appreciate the hard work that the people put into making each film. And
Hmm.
when you already have that experience of knowing how much work it takes to make one shot, to make to raise funds for making the film, you understand a little bit more that what you're watching is actually really important for someone else, and that maybe in that chaos, or let's say that jungle of things that you're navigating when making a film program, there's something really special and valuable from each person put into the film that
Hmm.
is surrounded by all that effort.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's always interesting to know other directors that have an experience in programming, because personally speaking, and I think I can speak on behalf of the Lago team as well, like programming is becoming more and more an essential path, I think, to understand in filmmaking today. So thank you very much for the answer. And
No, thanks to you for asking.
and Carlos, so you are now, as we said, we are you are selected here with La Mujer como Imagen, El Hombre como Portador de la Mirada. You also been touring with Todas las cicatrices diferencian en el viento with Angélica Restrepo. And so my question would be, what's next in your career? What do you think? What are your next steps in your path as a director, and what are your next path as a programmer as well?
Well, I at this moment it's a little bit sad because I've left film programming aside from for a while, because I'm making these films and also in charge of the distribution of them, and it takes a lot of time. So I had to stay away from film programming for a while. But right now I'm gonna like try to merge those things with a distribution project I'm starting for experimental cinema in Colombia, because I think all the efforts in experimental cinema are quite sparse. So I
Hmm.
want like to join them like in a co-production and co-distribution house in Colombia, So and that's also it also has this vision of working along with a curatorial approach. So that's something that I'm trying to make right now.
Mhm.
And we also, with Angelica, we're working together right now. So we are already have some projects for mixed media installations. We're also developing a film for a full dome experience.
Mm.
So I think we're navigating those other ways of filmmaking that are not necessarily cinema. But I think at one point we will, when I feel that when we feel that we're ready, we're also going to develop a new project for cinema. Also, like merging these things of experimental animation, new technologies,
Mhm.
and the contemporary world. And I think for that next movie, like contemporary expressions of colonialism and how it's still alive, at least in our country, and how it still inhabits each one of us.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, it sounds very interesting. I hope you manage to develop these projects and to and also the project about distribution. It sounds all very interesting, Carlos. And well, what more can we say? What, the only thing that's left to say is that come to Lago and see Carlos' movie that will show from the 21st to the 29th of July in Lago Film Fest on the lakes of the shore of the lake. Sorry. And Carlos, muchas gracias. Thank you very much for the lovely interview. We can stay offline a few minutes if you want to have a proper goodbye, but thank you very much for the interview and good luck with all your projects.
No, thanks to you, and I hope people at the festival can enjoy the film.
I'm sure they
Thanks a
will.
lot for selecting me.
Okay, ciao.